And this person wanted to represent that they love nature. And I think sometimes we think we don't know very much about blacks, and so this is a time for us to have good history. This is a hand-painted piece and then quilted, a very colorful and gorgeous red petunias. I'm not sure I understand this one. Anybody have any comments about it? It's called Sanji Hunt. It's by her, and it says Deception of the Formal Landscape. So,
I'd like to see the rectangle. There's little rectangles inside of it. It kind of looks like a map or something.
that does look like a map. Yes, good observation. Okay,
Or fields, like
fields.
farmers' fields, or just one field and the roads, and then the river.
My country background, is this a tractor?
Well,
I don't know.
it could
It doesn't look like International Harvester. Okay, we'll move on. Well, first of all, this is Dr. Maslumi, who is the curator of all the quilts we're going to see. So she has collected quilts, some made by whites, but mostly African American quilters. And so she's trying to educate us. And she founded the African American Quilt Guild in 1981. She founded the Women of Color Quilters Network, and she's been the recipient of many national honors. So what we're going to see next is part of her collection. You can join us if you want to.
I heard I could, thank you. I'm passing this direction.
Okay,
so
that's all right.
I appreciate the offer.
Sure. Okay, I didn't tell Nisha that I was going to do this, but this is a first for me. I have carried a notebook for 14 years, and I've rarely opened it. But today, I'm opening it, so this is a first. I'm going to use my notes. There is so much history here, and this just opened on Friday, so it's my second time in this gallery. I've been poring over my notes, but I want to be accurate. So I don't like reading to you, but I feel the need. So bear with me. Not my choice. So Maslumi says, when one faction of American society is excluded from the master narrative of our collective histories, the whole society loses. So, with that, we're going to talk about this piece by Sharon Carey Harmon on the face of it all. And I like some of her comments. And I don't know if you're familiar with the history of the NAACP, but I was not. So, hopefully this will be interesting to you. The NAACP is an African American civil rights organization formed in 1909, which I didn't realize it was that old. It was meant to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. Its name, retained in accordance with tradition, uses the once common term, colored people. The NAACP was formed partly in response to the continuing horrific practice of lynching and the 1908 race riot in Springfield, Illinois, the resting place of Abraham Lincoln. And I would say, if you haven't been there, those museums are phenomenal. Lots to be learned there. So it was started by a group of white liberals, which included descendants of the abolitionist William English Warren and Dr. Henry Moskowitz. So it was intended to be the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, but it was held a few months after that. And you all know it's still in use. And the author, or the artist, says, "My quilt represents all people, regardless of race or religion, who work together to bring about peace and equal rights for all people living in America. Each person is different, yet they come together to form a congruent piece." And I just think it's fascinating that those were her thoughts and how she created this. I think it's printed on fabric and then quilted. But it's a large piece, and it's what you see when you come in, and I think it's pretty impressive. This is another one that I find intriguing and something that I didn't know anything about. Well, maybe somewhere in here. It's about balance, and we all know that life isn't balanced now. And I think the way they created it, the artist created it, it comes from her knowing about a balanced scale of justice encircled by people. And it's of the National Association of Bench and Bar Spouses Foundation, which I didn't know existed, even though our daughter is married to an attorney. The foundation is composed of spouses of lawyers, judges, and provides grants to college students, law school students, world needs, and health concerns. And when you look closely, you find lots of white buttons, which the artist says represents tears, and the red buttons that represent the blood shed, and the black buttons represent power. And I just think that's a really fascinating way to represent all of that. And one thing I overlooked is on each one of these quilts, there's a little tag, and if you use your app on your phone, you can go later and hear lots more about each of these. And that's why there are like a number of paragraphs about each one of these quilts. And so they couldn't print all that. Usually there's some print about each quilt, but there isn't in this case because there was so much material. This I'm fascinated with because it's called Cage. I know why the caged bird beats his wings. And you're probably all familiar with Angel, who wrote the caged birds things. But this is different from that because it's about, the artist says, when she was in high school, at Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C., she saw all of this about Dunbar. He was a famous black poet, and he wrote the poem Sympathy in the book as lyrics of lowly life. And in the circumference of the piece are words from that poem. So that's who's represented here is Dunbar. This piece is by Marshall Fraser, and she has other pieces that have fabrics in this 3D representation. And this is called Mamie's Golden Legacy. And she said, the artist says, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And this is Hattie McDaniel, who was the maid in the movie Gone with the Wind. So she was in other movies and really represented the black people. And so in this particular case, the artist has represented it with all of the people, starting out with Patty Daniel, Sidney Poitier, and on and on and on to other black actors and actresses. Okay? And then we'll talk about this one. Another actor. Okay, Paul Robeson in 1943 portrayed in Othello. So this is historic for a number of reasons. And I like the way she has some tulips in here, which, hello, you're fine. So she worked those into the costume as symbols of passion and undying love. So he was an African American who played the character on Broadway with a supporting cast of whites. And he received rave reviews. It played to sold-out audiences. And he took a stand against racial intolerance because he wouldn't let the play go to the South, because he wouldn't have been able to stay where the white people stayed, but where the rest of the cast. And he always had seats saved so that blacks could be in attendance. And I think that was taking a real stand. So if you want to read this later, I think that would be fine. We'll just keep moving on. Oh, it's okay. Okay, because we're already running out of time. This whole gallery is about quilts from the days of civil rights. And most of us, or not all of us, but most of us remember those times. In the 60s, I was a young mother with 2 children, and I'm not sure that I was paying closely enough attention, but certainly now we all know what happened. This is one representing Levi Coffin, who was a well-known abolitionist for the Underground Railroad and accordingly saved a lot of slaves. And I'm happy to say that my great-great-grandfather had an Underground Railroad house in southeast Iowa. So I know a little bit about that. I think this is a fascinating piece. It's called, it's a sad state of affairs, but it is the Negro Traveler's Green Book, that in 1936, it was published and written by a postal service worker, and it was a guide for black people to travel in the South. So places where they could eat, places where they could stay, where they were safe when they traveled.
There's a movie about that.
No, I guess I don't.
Well, this
Oh,
this
yes, I
guy
do.
has to drive a black person through it.
Right, yes, I can't think of the name of it.
Well, it's called the Green Book, isn't it?
Is it called the Anyway, yes, there is a movie about it, and I have seen it. I'd forgotten about that, yes. I think this is the most powerful story. This is about Ruby Nell Bridges. And in 1960, she was a student in New Orleans. Her parents had moved there when she was small, and when she was ready for school, her dad thought she should go to a black school. Her mother thought she should go to a white school so that she would have more possibilities of greater learning. So she ended up going to a white school, and she passed the test that one would have to take to be accepted in the white school. The first day of school, she was the only one of 6 in the particular school that she was assigned. So she had a guide by the U.S. Marshal. U.S. Marshal took her to school because there were a lot of white parents who did not want her there. What the school did, I found amazing. She had her own teacher on the 3rd floor the whole year of school. So, what a difference a school makes. And I just think this is a great representation, not a very pretty part of our history, but certainly part of our history. And then Rosa Parks is represented. We're all familiar with Rosa Parks. There's actually a roadway named for Rosa Parks in Lincoln, Nebraska.
I knew that, because I used to live by there.
Okay, great.
There's a lot of history with the bus, isn't there?
So in 1955, she wouldn't move on the bus. She was not the first person to do that, but she stood her ground, and Shet knew that it had to be changes made, and there were. So we can look at that as the power of one person, but maybe not totally one person. But she certainly became the representative. And we've just learned that she was also a quilter, which is kind of a neat thing to know. Okay, this is pretty heavy-duty stuff. Any comments, questions? How does it make you feel?
Yeah, I think you got it well covered.
Well, I do remember I worked with a group of women from the United States, and this pregnant woman told me about.
These are amazing information representing the history of what happened in the past.
They didn't think that she would. I mean, she was a brilliant woman, but you know, that's just the way they thought.
Incomprehensible.
She got into college anyway.
Good, good. And this gallery has special meaning for me. Doris Fonseca is up there so high that you don't hardly see it. But she was my neighbor and wonderful quilter and friend of mine for many years. So I always feel really good about being in this gallery. I'm so happy the family thought enough of her to name a gallery for her. Actually, to give enough money, so yeah, very. Okay, we will do this gallery, and you're welcome to stay and look as long as you want to see, but we have to be finished in about 5 minutes. So this is a quilt from Uzbekistan. The unique thing about it is this fabric in the background, that fuchsia color, maroon color, is an E-cat. How many know the word E-cat? Oh, good. I always like to give at least one new word for the day. So this is an E-cat, I-K-A-T. It means that the thread was woven, not woven, let me start over. The thread was dyed in a pattern so that when it's woven, it gives this particular pattern. And you can always tell an E-cat by the way it bleeds from one color into the next. And right now, there are a lot of ready-to-wear items that have E-cats, and I don't think they're woven, I think they're printed, because I don't think any of us are gonna wanna pay for a shirt that is hand woven. In rare cases, maybe. That one's Chinese, and it shows that there are a lot of symbols on there that mean a great deal to Chinese people. Notice the two right here, this one and this one, are similar, and they represent longevity, and we're going to see that again in another jacket. The one thing I wanted to point out to you are these two in the corner. This is a Kantha, this is a Raleigh, and they come from India and Pakistan. We are very fortunate to have these because a woman whose last name is Stoddard, I can't think of her first name, Patricia Stoddard, was in India and Pakistan for a considerable amount of time because her husband was in the diplomatic service. And she wanted to know more about the textiles. And so she studied and went to homes and collected a massive collection. And now most of that is here. So thanks to her, the International Quilt Museum has probably the largest collection of campus and rallies in the world, except where they come from. This piece is especially significant because these animals, except for the fish, are all hand stitched to make it look like this representation. These little pieces are applied or appliqued, but most of it is hand stitching. So be sure that without getting your nose in, you get close enough to see those stitches. And in the other the first gallery we were in, opposite the Corral Gallery, there's one that says the sun shines on all of us, a quote from Gandhi, that has stitches that look like this, but the label says machine. I have to find out because it looks like hand. Rallies are used for windows, doorways, and lots of times when you see pictures of them in India, they're stacked up high. They use them for mattresses and so on. And notice the little tiny prairie points. And I overlooked with ones that were in the first gallery that are kind of a prairie point. That one quilt, the green one weighs 25 pounds, the other one weighs 50 pounds. So there's so much fabric in those. It took 3 years to make the one, and only 6 months during COVID to make the second one. And sometimes they're called never to be made again, because one of those would be enough. Okay, this is a prayer cloth. So Muslims would use this as they move about so that they can do their prayers wherever they are. But you'll probably argue with me that this is hand quilted, but it is. It looks like machine work, but it's a back stitch. So instead of going in and out, it goes up, back, up, and back. So you can stitch directionally when you do that, and you can also get very fine stitches. Okay, this is really rushing through because I spent too much time one place or another. Those three all show or represent their daily life. The far left one is from Canada, the second one is from South America, and the one on the east wall is Africa. So if you have time to come back and look for more, you're welcome to do that. Normally I would stay and answer any questions, but I'm going to go. And you can watch. Well, thank you.
Do they know that they can come to the
Yes,
talk?
yeah, I think you were not. Yes, you're welcome to come to the talk. If you just go downstairs, either by the elevator or upstairs.
Great,
It's under
very
the
educational
stairs to the
information.
classroom. And you're welcome to be there.